In this explainer, we're doing something a little different. We're not just looking at history, we're going to listen to it. We're opening a really unique window into the past to hear the story of one man's incredible life in 17th century New England, and we're going to hear it in his own words.
Okay, let's jump right in. Picture this. It's the winter of 1683. We're meeting Robert Seaver. He's 75 years old, he's living in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and he's gathered his family around him to share the epic story of his life, a life that literally witnessed the birth of a new world.
And that story, it begins half a century earlier, way back in the 1630s. Robert, just a young man of 26 at the time, made this monumental decision to leave everything, and I mean everything he knew behind in England, and set sail for a completely new and unknown continent.
So you gotta ask, what would make someone take a risk like that? Well, for Robert, and so many others like him, it was all about the search for religious freedom. He talks about an England where the church and the king demanded total conformity, and that just wasn't something he could live with. The promise of a new society, one they could build on their own terms, was worth any gamble.
Now, this is what I find so wild. Just look at the speed of this life change. On March 24th, he's in London taking his oaths of allegiance. A few weeks later, boom, he's on a ship called the Mary and John, and by June, his feet are on the ground in Boston. Think about that. In the span of a single spring, his entire world was just completely remade.
And yeah, this was no pleasure cruise. Robert's own words paint this absolutely terrifying picture of the voyage. You can just forget modern travel. This was a brutal, months-long ordeal where you weren't even sure you'd survive. Daily prayer was pretty much all that kept their spirits from breaking.
Okay, so let's move on to his first years in America. I mean, arriving safely was one thing, but now came the immense challenge of actually forging a life, a home, and a community literally from scratch in the untamed wilderness of a place called Roxbury. Of course, life wasn't just about survival, it was also about love. Soon after he arrived, Robert met his future wife, Elizabeth Ballard. Now, she'd gotten there a year earlier and was working as a maidservant, but he said her piety and godly conversation just captured his heart. And get this, they were married less than 6 months after he landed.
By 1637, Robert achieved this really critical milestone. He was made a freeman. Now, this wasn't just some honorary title, okay? This was a huge deal. It was the community basically declaring that he was a man of good character, and it gave him the right to vote and hold office. It made him a full-fledged participant in this new society he was helping to build. But the crucial point here is that nothing, and I mean nothing, was easy. Robert describes winters that were fiercer than anything he'd ever known in England, and just the back-breaking labor of clearing land and building a home. In this raw, brand-new settlement, simply surviving the day was a victory.
So, with their home established, Robert's life entered a whole new chapter. This one would be defined by the incredible joys of building a family and, well, the equally profound sorrows that came right along with it.
He and Elizabeth were blessed with 7 children. And you know, this number, it represents the future. It's the family that would carry on their name and their legacy in this new world that they had sacrificed so much to be a part of.
And here they are. You can almost see the family growing year by year. First came Shoeball, and then a double blessing with the twins, Caleb and Joshua. They were followed by their daughter Elizabeth, and then their son Nathaniel, and then came 2 more daughters, both of them named Hannah.
But all this joy was shadowed by some incredible hardship. Robert's own words here, they really remind us of the brutal reality of the 17th century. Building a family often meant you had to endure unimaginable loss. And Robert and Elizabeth would know that pain firsthand. They had to bury 2 of their children. The first Hannah lived for just about a year, so they named another daughter Hannah, which was a pretty common practice back then to honor the name, but tragically she was also taken from them when she was only 3. Robert said that burying a child felt like a part of his own heart was being put in the ground with them. And then, in 1657, came what was probably his greatest personal loss. After 23 years of marriage, his beloved wife Elizabeth died. She was only about 41. The church record is so simple, so stark, yet it marks the end of this foundational partnership, leaving Robert a widower with young children still at home. You'd think that would be enough tragedy for one person, right? But as if the personal losses weren't enough, Robert's life was also marked by these external disasters and conflicts that tested the resolve of his entire community and his family to their absolute limits.
I mean, just look at this table. It lays out 2 devastating fires he had to live through. In 1667, a lightning strike destroyed a huge chunk of his livelihood, 4 loads of hay. But 6 years later, something far worse struck: the complete and total destruction of the family home he had lived in for almost 4 decades.
And this just shows you how precarious life was back then. It all started with a simple, everyday act: a maid going upstairs with a candle, which ignited the thatched roof. The fire spread so incredibly fast that while they managed to save themselves and most of their belongings, the house where all their children had been born was just reduced to ashes.
And then came the war. The brutal conflict known as King Philip's War swept across New England, and it brought the ultimate tragedy right to the Seaver family's doorstep. Robert's adult son, Nathaniel, was killed in battle at Sudbury.
This was the 3rd child Robert had outlived. He described the news of Nathaniel's death as a physical blow to my chest. It's just a stark reminder that even after you survive the ocean crossing, the harsh winters and the fires, the dangers of this new world were always there.
So, let's bring it all home. We're back with Robert, now 75 years old, looking back on a life of just incredible hardship and resilience. So what did he want his grandchildren, and by extension us, to understand from it all? Well, his advice really distills a lifetime of hard-won wisdom into 5 simple, powerful principles. And these aren't just quaint little sayings. These are the very pillars that he built his life on and what he believed a successful society should be built on. This is his blueprint for the future.
And this, right here, is the crucial point of his whole story. Robert recognizes that something profound has happened. He looks at his grandchildren, and he realizes they're not just transplanted English folk. Their struggles, their joys, their entire lives in this new land, it's forged a completely new identity. They are, in his eyes, the first generation of something else entirely.
You know, Robert's story is such a powerful testament to how our environment and our experiences define us, and it leaves us with a question to think about. If his world, the literal wilderness, forged him and his family into something new, what are the forces, the modern wildernesses of technology, culture, and society that are shaping our own identities right now?